Hi, I'm Joyce Harper, and I want to welcome you to season 4 of my podcast, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? Together with expert guests and those with lived experiences, we will give you some tools to empower you to live a life of good health and happiness. Welcome to another podcast with one of the very wise women I interviewed for my book. And today I'm talking to Breeda Bermingham about Midlife Women Rock. Breeda is a former midwife and community public health nurse who became interested in menopause in 2018 while completing a psychology degree. She is now a sought-after speaker on menopause and midlife women, contributing to conferences and seminars across the UK and Ireland and helping to break the long-standing taboo. And she is author of the book Midlife Women Rock. In this podcast, we are going to talk about empty nest syndrome, the R word, retirement, and how we can empower women, especially women who are struggling at this time of their lives, to lead their best lives ever. Welcome, Breeda.
Hello, Joyce. Lovely to be here.
I'm so looking forward to our chat, and we've obviously chatted before because you're one of the amazing women I interviewed for my book, but we'll get back to that later. Let's start with what you've been doing. So I wanted you to share a little bit maybe about your menopause journey, but especially why you began researching midlife women.
Okay. Um, Joyce, I guess my journey goes back to when I returned to full-time education back at age 49. I went back to study psychology, and in my final year of my degree, I started reviewing the research around midlife women. I was 51, let's say 51, 52 at that stage. And I came upon the research around menopause, and I'm a former midwife and a public health district nurse, and I was absolutely shocked that I knew so little about this life stage called menopause. And I was really curious because, to be honest with you, I thought menopause was something that happened in our 50s. We got some flushes and our period stopped. And as I was reviewing the research and seeing, this phase called perimenopause, I saw all these different symptoms. I started to become really curious about why we didn't have the knowledge, that why nobody had told us that, this transition was, a really important part of women's lives. And I suppose the biggest question I had is why nobody around me was actually speaking about it. My mum had 5 sisters. I asked my mum about it, and she said she never spoke to her sisters. I also went to friends and I said, what do you know about menopause? And they said very little. And actually, one very good friend, she was a GP, she said to me, Breeda, what are you doing? This was back in 2019. Nobody will want to speak about menopause. Could you not think about a different topic, maybe to discuss or to research? But the curiosity got to me anyway, and I continued, and I did a sociological master's, trying to understand why there was so much shame and silence and denial and fear around menopause. So I did that in 2021, and I subsequently then wrote the book Midlife Women Rock, a menopause story for a new generation of women, because I do feel we're a new generation. We're not, like our mother's generation. 8 and 10 of us are inside in the workplace. We're more educated, let's say, than the generations that came before us. Plus, we have the right to understand what's actually happening as we're going through these years from our 40s into our 50s and 60s. And the other big alarming message in the research was it was so massively negative. And I had a big problem with this. I thought, oh my God, is this what I'm facing into? All this negative narrative and rhetoric about, disappearing, feeling disempowered. I just didn't like it myself. And I continued my research and I saw that it's not true. All this negativity is certainly not true. But if we kept menopause in the closet, the story that was handed to us would be handed to the next generation. So that's why I was determined to bring it out into the open. And that's why I wrote the book. I also contributed to the government, the Women's Health Task Force here in Ireland, in they becoming we becoming the first country in Europe, to set up a women's health task force, and menopause was chosen as one of the top 3 areas to actually provide more funding support and more research. And we've come on in leaps and bounds here in Ireland, like the UK, in the last 4 to 5 years.
Brilliant. And I totally agree with you. We are so on the same page with I know your mantra is educate, educate, educate. It's life changing, but also this problem with the negative narrative. So let's go into those a little bit more. So tell us how you framed the book.
So I deliberately actually use, Midlife Women Rock, because I wanted to try and, move against the actual narrative that was out there, the negativity. And I thought, hang on a second, we're not finished. We're still extremely productive at this time in life. We have a lot more wisdom than we had, let's say, in our 30s and 40s. I have 4 children, and the way I look at it now, these are kind of like my freedom years. I've just, in the last month, turned 60, and I'm looking forward to this new decade of my life, which, going back to my 40s, I never thought actually existed, whereby, you'd have more freedom as long as you're in good health. And we know more and more now about the importance of, remaining healthy, remaining active as we're moving through our menopausal years. And that was really, really important for me. So that's where I moved towards the positivity. And I also had found in the research that back in 2015, researchers down in Monash University in Australia, they started asking the question about why was menopause, you know, um, why was the narrative so negative for so long? There must be some positives to this life stage, and of course we now know there are plenty of positives. It's just that horrible reframing had kept us quiet, but the fact that we've blown it all open, we can now kind of, start looking at those women that really need the support, that the support is out there, and help women to thrive, not just, strive through these years. That's where I'm coming from with the work that I do.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm so with you. And when I did the interview for the book, one of the first things I asked everybody was their view on aging. So what do you think about this hugely negative narrative about aging? What's your view on aging?
Yeah, I do think, yeah. We do need to reframe it. This idea of retirement at 65, I really do think governments have to relook at it, because mindset, I know, is hugely important. So I know from many, many women that are, older than me, or in their 70s, their 60s was their best decade. An awful lot of them tell me. But they didn't realize it at the time when they moved into it. So they were saying, only last week I was talking to somebody, and she's 74, and she was just saying that, your 60s can today be one of your best decades. If you're a mother, your children, will have maybe flown the nest. You may choose to go part-time, job sharing, but to remain curious and to remain kind of open-minded to trying new things, taking on new ventures, travel more. There's so much there for us in our 60s. But I do think retirement and our mindset, that's where governments are going to have to tackle, because far too many people think, oh God, once I hit 65, I'm old, I'm gone past it. I love that book, Joyce. I don't know if you've heard of it, The 100-Year Life. They talk about the 4 quadrants, 0 to
Yeah.
25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75. And then after 75, that word old starts to come in, but not before 75. And I think that needs to be rolled out a little bit more, because again, it's the mindset. Like, if we feel old, we're going to look old, and our mindset is going to be, we're going to be thinking about heading downhill. Whereas, my mum is actually 90. She's 90 this year, and she still is very cognitively, thank God, well. But I look at her and I just say to myself, wow, I'm 60, she's 90. I've 30 more years ahead of me. So I'd like to think that I'll be productive in some way. in the world for the next 30 years, hopefully, fingers crossed. So aging does need to be tackled. There's a lady here in Ireland, Joyce, Professor Roseanne Kenny. She's head of the Tilda project. I don't know if you've heard of TILDA, and she's done an awful lot of work on aging and on positivity, re-aging. And she talks about these super agers, people that are living into their 80s and 90s in great health, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So I like listening to her.
I will look her up for sure. The Tilda Project. I love that. And I'm sure you've had this too. I've already had some negative comments about my book and saying, oh, it's a fairy tale. We can't be healthy and happy at this stage of our life. And another comment just said HRT. And we will come back into HRT in a minute. But um, there are women who are struggling, and I know you gave a great quote. You've already mentioned the empty nest, and I think that's one group of women who I'm seeing a lot of women who are coming up to that stage or are in that stage, and they are distraught. They've dedicated so much time of their life to their children, and they haven't looked after themselves or got hobbies and found out what brings them happiness and joy. And in my book, you quoted, this is your quote about the emptiness. You said, I've done the mother part. That was the first part of my life. But there's something more I feel that I can contribute it to in the second part of my life. So tell us, what would we say to women who are broaching their empty nest and who are struggling?
Yeah, I can fully understand where they're actually coming from, Joyce, because I had to make this kind of a conscious decision. There's a conscious kind of a change that we have to move from the maternalism and that mother part of us to realizing that there's actually more to us. But that cultural narrative, this is where I think a lot of women buy into you're old, you're invisible, you're gone past it once you get into your 50s. That cultural narrative is kind of, it's weighing on people's shoulders. So that's where we come in, I think, and try to explain to women in a kind of a pioneering way that there's actually more to you than who you were as a mother. And although I absolutely adore and I love being a mother, I had to consciously make that decision, and kind of there's a shift that we have to make. And I've been talking to my sisters about this because they have children now coming up to their late teens who are moving out of home. And I was explaining that, yeah, you do have to kind of sit with it for a while and, sit with the fact that, yes, I have been a mother, but there's actually more to me as a woman now. And it can be very exciting. And it's something that we need to explore. But I can see where those women are coming from, because I did sit with it for quite a while. Who was I now once my children had moved on? But it's cultural, and it's also something that women need to realize that, there's more to you as a woman. And it's not just married women, or it's not just, mothers, single women as well, who have been working for years. I've met some of them and they're asking themselves, what's there for me now in my mid-50s? They may have done they may be very successful in the workplace, and they just want to change. And it's about exploring that and understanding it's okay to ask these questions and to reflect that there's not something wrong with us when we are asking ourselves, is there more, or what's going on now? That it's an important thing, and it's an important question to ask. And I heard a lovely line recently: there's no transformation in life without a transaction. And this is where the investment in self comes in. And I found that, speaking to a life coach and doing some work, and even if it's only something like 6 weeks to start with, this is where a lot of women would hugely benefit from working with other women. in exploring what's out there for me now in my 50s and when my children leave home. So yeah, I can see where they're coming from.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I've had a life coach for about 6 years, and I'm partway through training as a coach. Actually, I think, as you have been, I think women need this support at this time and some guidance about how to reframe. And you have reframed. You went back and started studying again in your
Yeah.
midlife, and many of the women I interviewed for the book have had the same. They've done that, which I think's brilliant. So the other phrase I wanted to talk about a little bit more was retirement. So you've mentioned retirement a few times, and you've also mentioned sense of purpose. We do need to have something. It doesn't need to be looking after people. And in the book, I talk quite a couple of times about the grandmother hypothesis, that this view that we can nurture our grandchildren. And I say to women, okay, if you're a grandmother, embrace it, and it brings so much joy and happiness as just being a grandfather. But also think about your own sense of purpose away from your children and grandchildren and what you want to do. And certainly around retirement, you don't necessarily have to stop working totally. You can, as you have and others have, maybe retrain, maybe do something else, maybe do something that's nurturing a community. So tell us about the retirement. How do you feel about retirement?
Yeah, I don't actually like the word retirement. And in my head, I don't see myself retiring
Yeah.
until I think in my late 70s or 80. 80, I think I'll embrace it then when I'm 80. But you see, the grandmother hypothesis, I think, again, it's a story that's been handed down to us. And even speaking to my own mother, she was saying, when my dad died very suddenly at 70, and she was saying back then, retraining was not something that women normally did. And whereas we have the opportunities now, there are lots of opportunities for women to either retrain, reskill. They don't need to be working full time. They can go part time, well into their 60s, and continue to contribute even into their 70s. And that sense of purpose, of course, and giving back in some way. That's where I found huge fulfillment, let's say in the last few years in particular. I ran these monthly cafes here for women in Ireland, just educating them around menopause. And it was life changing for so many. But not only, the women, they received something, but the fact that I could share the knowledge that I had learned through my own degree and master's, that for me was massively fulfilling. So it's again finding something that you're passionate about, and for me it happened to be menopause. Let's say over the last 5 years in particular, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, gardening is something that people love to do. Dancing, finding that passion, and a lot of people through their passion that can lead to purpose. And I've seen this over and over in a lot of the women I've met in the last few years. But passion, purpose is really important in midlife. I mean, Joyce, there's a statistic here in Ireland that in Ireland, we have the greatest prescriptions for benzodiazepines in women aged 60 and over, right, in the whole of Europe. And I'm asking myself, what is going on that we've got the highest rate of prescribing of benzodiazepines for women aged 60 and over? Why? Like, there's research there. If somebody wants to go and do something, what is going on that so many women are being prescribed benzodiazepines? You know, and mental health rates, we know, again, all over Europe, it's 45 to 55, highest rates of mental health. Again, it's no coincidence that it's happening during that transition from the peri to post. And this is why I feel the education piece is so important, educating people about not only the physical changes, but those emotional, psychological, the anger, the rage, the depressions, the low mood, all normal. They're all normal parts of us moving through these years for many, many women. But sadly, far too many women beat themselves up, and they feel that there's something abnormal about them if their feelings are big, or their feelings are huge at this time in their lives. So again, that's why we just need to keep talking, and stay out there, and stay, spreading the message that, menopause is a normal transition that can be severe for some women, but with the right supports, be it HRT, cognitive behavioral therapy, supplements, they can get through it and thrive. And that's my philosophy.
And Breeda, what about lifestyle? So if we're going to support women at this stage of our life, and we're going to be different, as you said, to our mothers and grandmothers, we are fitter and healthier, and we do have much more opportunities. But if we want to have good health span as well as lifespan, how important is looking after our general health as well as our mental health?
Yes, so I guess the biggest thing for me personally was movement. I mean, I was one of these women that thought when I got to 50 I could slow down, but I see all the research is saying the direct opposite. We actually need to move more. And as I mentioned to Joyce, I'm just back after a week-long expedition in the Arctic. And I can honestly say I don't think I'd have been able to do that in my 40s. And what's interesting, I've been reading about testosterone and how it actually increases in some women post menopause. And I definitely think that I must be one of these women because I I didn't have a pain or an ache having when I once I came back from the expedition. I mean, it was tough. It was physically and mentally. We had to dig deep. There was a lot of carrying of, large rucksacks, pulling sleds and pulling pulks. And but we had a training program for 6 months before it. And I honestly think I don't think I'd have been able to do it in my 30s and 40s. But there's, something about, again, strength. And again, I think it's mental strength as well. Like emotionally, we would have been challenged as well, crossing these large frozen lakes in blizzards of 80 kilometers an hour at times. But it there's something about us getting stronger, I think, as we age as well, as long as we look after our health. And for me, movement, I was never a runner. I've started the 5k park runs in the last year and a half, and I absolutely love it. Every Saturday morning there's a great sense of community as well. And I do some weights. I play a lot of tennis. But I do realize, I'm conscious of the fact that I do need to keep moving, and movement is just a part of my life now, just like getting up and breathing, brushing my teeth. Movement is non-negotiable as we age. So that's one of my big lifestyle hacks for people.
I say the same. My exercise is non-negotiable. It is now in my diary. So people at work often want put me. They look at my diary and put meetings on, and the dates are blocked out. So I've just got back from doing. I do two classes normally in a row. So I've just got back from doing body attack and body pump, and I'm with you. I feel fitter at 63 than I did. I would say even in my 20s, and I used to teach aerobics when I first finished my PhD in my 20s. I was an aerobics teacher. I used to teach 3-4 times a week. But I absolutely feel fitter now, even though I've got a dodgy knee. So it's about supporting women and hoping that there's no quick
Yeah.
fix, is there? What do everyone thinks, oh, I can just take a pill or something and I don't need to do all this movement and exercise and look after my nutrition. But what is there a quick fix?
No, oh no, there's certain, it's a lot, it's a change, a lifestyle change, which, can be tough in the beginning, but the benefits are massive. That's all I will say. I mean, there were 14 other women, 10 of us were over 55, up in northern Finland for the week. And I mean, all I can say is that they were badass women. Some of them were in their mid 60s. They were stronger, in particular mentally strong than I was at times. But yeah, badass. And I can honestly put my hand up and say I couldn't do this in my 40s. I honestly don't think I would have had the mental or
Yeah.
physical. I was so exhausted from running around after 4 children or texting them around the place. I didn't have that time, whereas I do have the time now, and that has made a huge difference. We've also signed up here in Ireland, Joyce, for something that is going to be big. By 2040, the Irish government have signed up that we will become the most physically active country in Europe. So they just signed up in the last few months. So it's really going to be interesting to see what initiatives, or programs they're going to put in place. But having looked at the outline of the proposal, there's a lot, being pointed towards the over 50s. And in particular, the importance of movement and exercise in this cohort, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I do think that Professor Roseanne Kenny from Trinity College, she has had an input here in, enlightening the government on the importance of activity, movement, and exercise as we age, and the huge benefits of this. So, yeah, we're hoping to become the most physically active country in Europe by 2040. So that's great to see the government doing that here in Ireland. So it's like this, where she comes from as well, Roseanne Kenny. It's like the new science of living longer and a healthier life. And it's the science is backing this up. The importance of socialization is really important as well as we age. Nutrition, food, movement and exercise. Again, being curious or taking on new hobbies or taking on new experiences, and understanding the link between doing that and neuroplasticity and brain cell development. And with the big advances in neuroscience and neuropsychology, we can continue making new brain cells as we age, which is something that's only really come to the fore in the last 10 years. The old way of thinking was that, again, by the time we got to middle age, our brain cells were dying off. I mean, that's not true. And neuroscience and neuropsychology is showing us that, the more we use our brain, the more neural pathways we'll continue to build as we age. And again, this is great, I guess, when it comes to prevention of dementia or other debilitating diseases as we get older.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you that we have to really do the full package, as you said, movement and nutrition and all of those things. And you mentioned anger and rage and mental health issues. So, how important is it for women at this stage to recharge and to calm down our very active brains and relax? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I again, just from my own work, I think, I've met a lot of women who find it very frightening, when they do feel very angry or they're flying off the handle a lot of the time, let's say in perimenopause. But again, explaining what I found is explaining to them that this is just part of this transition for many, not for all, but for many. That in itself can be very reassuring. And again, it's that self care piece, making more time for themselves, taking help when help is needed. Like, we're brilliant multitaskers. In particular, as mothers, we're doing everything for everyone. But again, if one is experiencing a lot of perimenopausal symptoms, my philosophy is take as much help as is coming your way. That can be life changing as well, taking the supports. But something else I find, Joyce, is that a lot of women feel so guilty when it comes to rest, relaxation, or even making that time for self care. There's this guilt about, why should I deserve, to give that time to myself? But it is so, so important. It's like that empty bucket. I often draw it out when I'm doing talks or presentations in workplaces, and all of the time it's the bucket they're giving out, out, out. And when I ask them, what are you actually putting in to your um, self care bucket, it's usually a lot less than what's actually going out. You know.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's a really good example to give. And I always say self care is not selfish. And if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it, are we?
Yeah, yeah, that is true. But yeah, the guilt a lot of women find, even like sitting down or having a nap in the middle of the day, they wouldn't think about it, or consider it, even though they're not sleeping at night. And when you explore and ask what's going on there, a lot of the time it might be from childhood, whereby if you're sitting down, you're lazy, you're considered lazy. Whereas, having that 20-minute nap can be, again, life saving for many who are not sleeping great at night through the perimenopause years. And, it's part of that self care that is so important for us at this time in our lives.
Now you have mentioned HRT. You also mentioned CBT and other ways to deal with some of the symptoms.
Mm.
And when I interviewed for your
Mm.
book, for my book, you said, of course, a percentage of women are going to benefit greatly from HRT. However, this idea that 100% of us need to be on it, that's really patriarchal medicine. It's going backwards. So tell us more
Mm.
about HRT, your views on HRT.
Okay, so I mean, hormone replacement therapy, replacing estrogen, progesterone, testosterone for a certain percentage of women, it is definitely life changing, and I've seen that. And early menopause, women, who are experiencing a very early menopause, again, the research seems to be there that replacing the estrogen and progesterone can really, really help with symptoms. However, telling every woman that, you have to be on HRT. I tried HRT when I was 55, Joyce, because I have a history of osteoporosis, and I saw that, yes, when it comes to bone disease, replacing estrogen can be of benefit. But again, I think it can be of benefit if you start very, very early. And I do think a lot of women need to be on it from probably early 40s in order to benefit from a bone perspective. Because again, once you come off HRT, if you start taking it, you come off it, you lose the actual benefit that's there when it comes to bone health. So I tried it, but unfortunately, I was one of those women that it just did not suit. I ended up having to go to my GP. I was back. I felt like I was breastfeeding again. My boobs were so enlarged, and I was also leaking quite a lot. And I actually ended up having to go to a breast surgeon. My GP sent me on, so I made a decision then, look, I'm going to look at all the alternative ways of managing symptoms, and lifestyle was huge then for me. And I'm 60 now, and I can honestly say I haven't looked back. I take my calcium, magnesium, let's say, for my bone health, and I do weight training. I'm very conscious of that. I take the K2 as well. But this idea, I mean, the last time I looked at the stats in the UK, 20% of women, I think they got to 20% of women were being prescribed or taking HRT. Not everybody needs it, not everybody can take it, but I did find back in 2000 and 2021 there during COVID, there was this belief that, everybody should be taking it. And for those women where it was contraindicated, they really felt they were missing out hugely. And that's not true, not all women need it. I do feel, I mean, look at the 20% of women who sail through menopause. I've actually met quite a few of those women that don't have symptoms. And I think we need to start researching and looking at these women a little bit, maybe as well as women with the severe symptoms of menopause. What are the factors that are enabling women to have very few maybe physical or emotional symptoms? What's going on in their lives, or is there a genetic component? What is it that's actually happening? But yeah, that's my view on HRT. If people are taking it and they're benefiting from it, that's wonderful. But not everybody needs it, and not everybody can actually take it.
Yes, seven of the 50 women I interviewed actually said they didn't, but they weren't affected by menopause, perimenopause, or any symptoms at all. And they did use the word quite a lot, which I know is really triggering to a lot of women. They did say that they sailed through it. I remember
Mm-hmm.
many years ago, I was at a conference, and that was one of the themes about just exploring that, as you said, in the need to explore that in more detail. And it really upset a lot of women. But we have to realize every woman's totally different and how they're going to
Mm-hmm.
respond. There was also two women I interviewed for the book who were only on HRT, including one of them who sailed through it. She only was taking HRT because she had been led to believe it would reduce her risk of getting dementia, which is just not, we don't have any data. Yeah. So it was, so
No.
no symptoms, but taking basically a drug because of something that might happen, which I think is really sad. And do we feel that, how do you feel about misinformation out there about menopause? But it is a bit of the Wild West, isn't it?
It is, I guess, on social media. Yeah, it certainly is. And again, like that, women have come up, some of the talks or presentations I've done, women in their 60s in the workplaces have come up to me and they've said to me, in the last 6 months, let's say, I would have had two women that came up and said, like, when I was talking to them and explaining about symptoms and everything about perimenopause and menopause, they said, is there something wrong with me? I didn't get any of those symptoms. And I was thinking, you're part of the 20%, that do not get symptoms. Just their periods just stopped, and they didn't suffer at all. But they are that percentage are out there. That 20% are out there that don't have symptoms surrounding this transition, this life transition. But yeah, the social media, it is, I suppose, the Wild West. I do think there's an onus on women, to do their research, to get as much information as they possibly can. And I always say, to follow people that resonate with you. If somebody resonates with you, follow them. But I mean, in the last 4 to 5 years, the big positive is that it has been brought into the public domain. That is the huge positive. I think we've opened the closet doors, we've brought it out. It is sad to see, the big varying views. I mean, this idea that 100% of us should be on hormone therapy for the rest of our life. I don't think that's true at all. Maybe the research will come down the line in the next few years, where I'll be proven wrong, but I somehow don't think so. There are side effects to HRT which people have to be aware of as well, and regular checkups while people are on that medication are so important. And somebody recently said to me, her health insurance provider, she was going traveling, and she didn't realize that she'd have to tell the travel insurance company that she was on HRT. So that's something as well which was interesting.
Yeah. Now, Breeda, you've supported hundreds of women through the perimenopause and beyond with your really important work. Has there been something that's surprised you about the women that you've been supporting?
Yeah, it's that lack of education. It's the massive lack of education. Or when I go back to 3, 4 years ago, it's the fact that women cannot talk to other women. That has improved dramatically. But back, let's say 4 years ago, every woman I met had said there was nobody around them that they could talk to. They couldn't talk to their mother. They couldn't talk to their sisters. They couldn't talk to their friends, or if they did bring it up, they were met with a wall of silence. That this was very commonplace. But thankfully, in the last 2 years, I don't hear that as much anymore, because it's in the public domain. So I think we're doing very well in that respect. What I have spotted, even in the last month or so, is that kind of shame is still there around saying one is in menopause. And the shame is associated with this idea that we're finished, or we're finished, our life, our life's worth and work is over. So there's the work. And I think this is where your book is going to be hugely tapping into that. We're certainly not over. We're certainly not finished. There is still so much out there that we can do, we can achieve. Um, and Joe Mosley, as you know, Joe
Yeah.
is fantastic when it comes to, again, activity wise. Um, keeping active and to keep moving. But women need to hear that these options are out there. This is what, I can't believe that menopause can be positive. That was something I heard an awful lot going back again 3 or 4 years ago, or I never heard a positive word about this time in my life. Um, and when I did the Arctic, that was one of the things I wanted women to be aware of, is that, like, just because you're 60 doesn't mean that you can't go off and do something, that's way outside your comfort zone. And the adventure.ie were the three guides we had. They were unbelievably professional, and their expertise keeping us safe, that was their number one priority while we were out there, because temperatures change so rapidly. We went down from a -12 to -15, 16 very quickly on one of the days. And again, you've got to be able to change your clothes very quickly, cover your face, cover your hands. So they were brilliant in training us to adjust very, very rapidly. But I absolutely loved it, and I'm still kind of processing everything that I learned. I learned how to make a fire, make a fire out in the wilderness, how to build a shelter, how to put up a tent. We slept out in a tent one night. Some of the women slept in these ice holes made in the ice up there in the Arctic. But again, all so new. And it was great fun as well. There was lots of laughs, and we'd snowball fights. When we were cold, when you stopped moving in the skis or the snowshoes, some of us used to get cold, so we'd start throwing snowballs at each other, having snowball fights, because laughter and fun, as your book suggests, is so important as we get old. And a lot of us lose that side of us, the fun and laughter. But we had a lot of it in the Arctic, I must say.
Wow, that's amazing. And seeing people like you and Joe, obviously Joe's someone I interviewed for the book as well, and she's been on my podcast a long time ago. But seeing you as great role models, having fun, just having bloody fun, I think is really, really important to see that, and for women to see that and think, well, yeah, they're having fun. I can do that.
Hmm. Yes, yes, that is very true. But again, I guess we do need role models. We do need to see other women, because there hasn't really been a template for what midlife brings. We have no template there for what it's like to be a thriving midlife woman. um and we're the first generation, I do feel, to provide the template for those that are going to come after us.
Yep, yep, we do need to do that. Now, tell us a little bit more about the cafes and retreats that you've been running.
So, let's say for quite a number of years, I was running these monthly cafes. There were gatherings of women locally, let's say, where I live, where they come together for information. And what I had noticed was that, there were a lot of social gatherings from the women meeting up and talking to one another, which was fantastic. Now, in the cafes, let's say I haven't run a cafe since the end of last year, because most of my time now is the workplace. I go into workplaces doing talks. I consult with henpicked menopause in the workplace in the UK as well. And what's great to see is that more and more workplaces are interested in becoming menopause friendly, or introducing menopause as a well-being topic in the workplace. So that's what I've been doing, let's say, in the last 6 months, more so than the actual cafes, or even one-on-one. I was doing a lot of one-on-one consulting. What I've noticed here in Ireland, when free HRT came online last year, I saw a drop in the number of women looking for information. The free HRT, I think, did make a difference. The vaginal estrogen is also free here. And what I'm looking forward to is trying to get some statistics on the number of women that are actually taking HRT here in Ireland, because I haven't been able to access that. But I would like to see it as a result now of the free HRT, because I know demand has gone way up here in the last 6 months because of that initiative by the government.
We're coming near to the end. I wanted to ask you, what does it truly mean to rock midlife?
Oh, God. Well, I guess it's kind of getting to know oneself um, a lot better. I think my 50s, I look back on my 50s, they were kind of phenomenal, is the word I would use, even though I was moving through, perimenopause to postmenopause. I really got to know myself an awful lot better. And to know what my value system really, really is now. I've got a little bit more courageous, I would say, definitely. And if my 40-year-old self said to me, you'd be going up to the Arctic Circle with 14 other women, and you'd be spending a week up there fundraising and raising awareness for women's heart health, because that's why we did it. We were raising awareness for women's heart health over 50 because of the stats around heart health. They're so high. I would have said, "You're kidding me." My 40-year-old would say, 40-year-old me would have said, "No, you must be dreaming. That definitely wasn't going to happen." But it has happened, and who knows what else is ahead in my 60s. I've chosen the word sensational for my 60s, and I'm hoping that it will be a sensational decade, Joyce.
Breeda, we're at the final. We're at the final two questions. So I can't wait to see
Okay.
what you're going to answer. And I know I did ask you this for the book, but here we go. Breeda, what makes you happy and where is your happy place?
So my happy place, I think, is nature. It's anywhere where I'm out in nature, walking in the woods, walking by the sea, swimming in the sea. Definitely, in my 50s, I have found nature to be wonderfully calming and relaxing, and it certainly is my happy place. And what was the second part of that question, Joyce?
What makes you happy and where is your happy place? So they're related.
Well, I guess, yeah, family, my spending time with family. Also now, my mum is needing us more at this stage in her life, and I'm actually down here staying with her at the moment. Um, so yeah, family, close friends, connection is number one on my value system. I did it there in the last few years, and I love being connected to nature, connected to others, and connected to myself. So they are what's really important to me.
And I hope that I'll come swimming with you very, very soon. So I am planning a trip to come over
Yes,
to Ireland.
yes, exactly. Yes, and we'll do the sauna as well, sauna and
Oh,
swim.
yeah, I do love the sauna. The very, very last question. Again, I've asked you this before, and you can say this specifically to you or to women in general. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh wow, I would say to her, trust in life more. I think, trust in life, not to worry or, to not to sweat the small stuff, and certainly to trust more in life, that there's more good out there in the world um, than negativity. And I think that's what I would say. And my 4 children, gratitude. I say to them, when they're going to bed at night, find 3 things during the day, no matter how bad your day is. Find 3 things to be grateful for, even if it's only your bed that you're in. So that's it.
That's very, very good advice. So, Breeda, thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. Discussion very motivating, I'm sure, especially for those women who are struggling. It's not easy, but you've got this. You really have. So, Breeda, keep up your fantastic work, and Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you over the summer here in Ireland, Joyce. Take care.